All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm so excited to get the chance to talk to you today. And so as you can tell from this title slide, we're going to be going through the science and ethics of junk food today. So hopefully some of you guys had the chance to go through this path on Tract, but no worries if you didn't get the chance to do that. You can totally still participate in the live event. Those of you who have done the path might have a little bit of an advantage in the activity that we do later, but definitely not a requirement. All right, so just to go through today's plan really quickly, I will introduce myself very briefly, just so you get an idea of the face behind the path. Then we'll go through why I made this path, some of the things that I learned while I made it, and why I wanted you guys to be able to go through it. Then number 3, we'll talk about things that you can take from the path, things that maybe you can apply to your own life or teach your friends and family. Then we're going to move on to a fun activity. So you are going to need another device for that. So that could be like a laptop, a tablet, or a phone, anything you have on hand. So if you want to go ahead and get that out now, that would be great. And then we're going to move into an Ask Me Anything. So you can ask me any questions you have about the path, about food, life, school, anything that you happen to want to know. And then we'll talk about some next steps. So that's like upcoming live events and then more paths that you can explore. All right, so we're going to head straight into an introduction. So very nice to meet you all. My name is Yael. So just so you know a little bit about me, I just graduated from Palo Alto High School. So I was a senior last year, and then I'm now a student at Brown University. Some of the things I really love, I love sports. So I'm a huge Golden State Warriors fan. And I also really love journalism. So I was the editor-in-chief of my high school sports magazine. You can see me in that picture right there with Marcus Thompson, who's a Warriors journalist, and we're at a Pali journalism camp. And then in my free time, I really like to lift weights, ride bikes, and I really like to cook. So you can see in that last picture there, I'm at a powerlifting competition and I'm doing my warm-ups. All right, so now in terms of why I made this path. So as you might have guessed, I just named 3 of my interests, and they are lifting, biking, and cooking. So I definitely love food and nutrition. But really, when I started lifting weights about like 3 years ago or so, I realized that food was not just food. Food was really like what was fueling me. So I really got interested in nutrition and learning about how to properly fuel my body so that I could perform as well as possible in the gym. So that included learning about things like how much protein I should be eating every single day to make sure that my muscles are recovering adequately, learning about like carbohydrates and like how much I should be eating before I work out to have enough energy to get through it and things like that. I'm also just a science lover in general, so science was always my favorite class. In high school, I really loved chemistry, and I also am still interested in health and medicine, so food science seems to fit right in. And then the last part, so I talked about being involved in journalism. So generally people who get involved in journalism also are interested in like social justice and like ethics questions. And one thing that really interested me was the obesity epidemic that's going on not only in the United States, but globally. And I felt that a lot of the people who I talked to sort of viewed this issue as like an individual problem. So they thought like individual people were responsible for what was happening with their body. They were responsible for obesity. And when I started to look a little bit deeper, I thought, okay, maybe this isn't just an individual problem. And I started finding out that like it goes all the way to the top, right? Like food companies are funneling tons and tons of money into this research into how to make their food as addictive as possible. So that was another really interesting thing for me to find out. So this is the article that actually inspired me to make the path. This was an article that was in the New York Times. And so this encompasses a lot of the things that I talk about in the path. So I won't go into too much detail about what we actually talked about in the path. So for those of you who want to see that, you can definitely check it out if you haven't done so already. But off the top of my head, I can mention sort of like 2 things that I still sort of remember to this day. So one thing that I remember the article talking about was essentially like, let's take it way back to our human ancestors, right? Who the way they got their food was hunting and foraging and gathering. And so a lot of the times when they were in like the woods and they saw something really brightly colored, that was a signal from their brain, go eat that, go get that, because they knew it was fruit, which had a lot of sugar or glucose or energy. So humans are sort of naturally inclined to go towards foods that are really brightly colored. Nowadays, we don't hunt and forage for our food. We sort of just get it at the supermarket, but food companies still use that to sort of trick us. And so especially kids are really attracted to like bright neon colored things. So if you've ever gotten like a lime green Otter Pop or like a blue Jolly Rancher or something like that, or like a pink neon pink Airhead, those are tools that the food companies are using to make us attracted to that food and want to eat it. And then another thing that the article sort of mentioned was there's like some crazy complicated scientific concepts like vanishing caloric density, which is basically the example I like to use is Cheetos. So if you've ever eaten Cheetos, they sort of like, they're so airy and light that they sort of just melt straight away once you put them in your mouth. And that's actually something that the food companies design their product to have. Like they want it to basically melt away into your mouth because then you don't notice that you're eating it as much and you can overeat it a lot more than you could something that's like tough to chew, like a steak or veggies or something like that. So that was really interesting to me. Okay, so now what you'll learn, well, we just went through some of the really like cool and complicated food science. So if any of what I just talked about was interesting to you, the path itself goes a lot more in depth and talks about that at length. So a bunch of things about how the food we eat affects our body and our brain, you know, like what sort of like hormones and chemicals are released in response to certain foods, and what responses that can cause in our body. So really interesting food science, things like that. I think the most important thing that you can take away from the path is just how to make better food choices for yourself and maybe how to encourage friends and family to do the same thing. It's really a lot easier to make good food choices when you know exactly what's going on in your food, and what these food companies are maybe doing to their food. So throughout the path, you can learn how to make those sort of more mindful, more educated choices about the foods that you're eating. And then lastly, it's a good point, like we talked about, the food companies being sort of responsible to some extent for the obesity epidemic. I thought one cool thing that you can take from this path is just you can be a person who holds these food companies accountable, right? Like you're going to be in the know, you're going to know all the little tricks they have up their sleeves to make people addicted to their food, and maybe you won't fall for those tricks. So then in terms of applications to life, if any of you are interested in medicine, like health, being a doctor, being a dietitian, a nutritionist, anything like that, this will be great for you. Or even if you're just interested in the culinary field, like maybe being a chef. And then in terms of the perks of attending, so anyone who is a subscribed user on Tract gets 50 XP for coming. And then anyone who's a registered subscriber also gets an extra 10 XP for any questions that you ask. If you're not a registered subscriber, obviously we can't give you those XP benefits, but if what you see in this path seems cool and you might be interested in going through this path or others like it, definitely be sure to subscribe. All right, so now I'm gonna pause for a little bit after I ask you guys this key question because I wanna give you guys a chance to actually respond. So I wanna pose this question to you guys because it's a question I asked myself when I started making the path, which is basically, is junk food ethical, right? So at its core, we know that these junk food companies are designing their food to be addictive, to be like overconsumed. But we also know that if we overconsume this junk food, it's unhealthy for us. So is it still okay that junk food companies are spending so much money, so much time to make these really addictive foods when they know that people who get addicted to their foods are going to be less healthy? So I want you guys to go ahead and answer that question in the chat right now. I'm just going to pause for a few minutes to let those responses start to come in. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm going to highlight my favorite response from you guys, and I'll shout out whoever it was that gave that response. And if some of you are sort of wondering how to answer this, I mean, one thing that I thought about was, you know, on the one hand, yes, it's hard to say that it's an ethical decision because they know they're making people unhealthy by making these really unhealthy foods. But on the other hand, companies need to make money, right? And so the aim of every single food company out there who's putting products on grocery store shelves is to sell as much food as possible. So you could ask yourself, is it the responsibility of the company to make healthy, nutritious food, or is it the responsibility of individual people to make, I guess, those healthy, nutritious choices for themselves? All right, so I'll give everyone a few more minutes there, but we might start to move on soon. Again, if you didn't respond and you'd like to respond, definitely be sure to keep this question in mind throughout the presentation, because we will be coming back to this question at the end of the presentation. All right, so I think we will go ahead now to our fun activities. So again, if you haven't gotten out an extra device, like a laptop, a tablet, or a phone, you want to get that out now, because we're going to be doing a Kahoot. And this Kahoot is mainly going to deal with sugar, so like one of the three major components of junk food. Usually there's like sugar, salt, and fat. So we're going to be mainly focused on sugar today. So we'll be pulling up a Kahoot for you guys to participate in. And I can read that PIN number out for you guys right now. So once you get that joining screen for the Kahoot, the PIN is 4780691. And that game PIN is going to be at the bottom of the screen the whole time if you happen to need it or if you happen to join late. So we're going to give everyone a few more minutes to join. Again, the PIN is 4780691 if you need it. Okay, looks like I think we have just about everyone joined now, so I think we can go ahead and start. And if anyone needs to join late, again, that PIN will be at the bottom. All right, so we're going to get started with our first question now, which is, which of these food products has the most grams of sugar per serving? So your options are Oreo cookies, Smucker's strawberry jam, Quaker granola, or Honey Nut Cheerios. So I mean, this one you're just going to have to take your best guess if you don't know. Like, this isn't something that I expect you guys to know, but just use your own best educated guess. All right, so a lot of you guys had the same initial thought that I did, which is that the Oreo cookies would have the most sugar, which I think is what a lot of people assume, right? Because it's like we associate sugar with dessert and cookies are dessert. But one thing to note is that a lot of times products that are marketed as sort of like health foods will sometimes have even more sugar than like their dessert counterpart. So in this case, just in case you were curious, the Oreo cookies have 13 grams of sugar per serving, and the Quaker granola actually has 16 grams of sugar per serving. So it just goes to show you that if you are trying to limit how much sugar you're consuming, it's not necessarily enough just to avoid desserts and sweets and candies, because sometimes products that you wouldn't even expect to have a lot of sugar can have a lot of sugar in them. All right. All right. You guys will get the next one, I bet. No worries. I didn't know this one either. So now we're going to go through a very similar question, but with a slight difference. So which of the food products below has the most grams of added sugar? So notice we're dealing with the same 4 food products, Oreos, jam, granola, and Cheerios, but we're talking about added sugar this time. So we will go through the difference between added and total sugar after everyone gets their response in. All right, let's see. Okay, did I trick any of you? I did. Okay, not a lot of you though, so good job on that. So yeah, in this case, Oreos actually do have the most grams of added sugar per serving. So this is why the distinction between added sugar and total sugar is important, because generally when people try to limit their sugar intake, they're trying to limit their added sugar intake. And basically the difference is what it sounds like. So added sugar is sugar that like a food manufacturer will add to the food while it's being produced. So like of those 13 grams of sugar in Oreos, all of them are added during production. Whereas something like the Quaker granola, it had 16 grams of sugar per serving, but only 8 of those grams were actually added sugar. So the difference is that added sugar is sort of the thing that we try to avoid. It's what's added during production. And total sugar is naturally occurring sugar, like the kind we can find in fruit or milk or yogurt or things like that. It's usually sugar that occurs naturally, and it's usually attached to something else like fiber or protein that slows down its digestion. All right. Ooh, I see Devin's risen to the top. Good job on that one. Okay, so now we're going to move on to how much added sugar is in this less sugar, quote unquote, cup of Chobani yogurt. So I've gone ahead and scratched out the grams of sugar on there, but they are marketing this product as a less sugar or low sugar product. It's a mango yogurt, and it's an alternative to their sort of normal mango yogurts. How much sugar do you think is in this less sugar cup? All right, nice. So, I mean, this again is sort of just like a random guess, but there is 5 grams of added sugar in the less sugar cup of Chobani yogurt. So now it's hard to say if that's like a lot or a little until we compare it to the normal yogurt cup, which is what we're going to do in the next question. So just keep in mind that the less sugar cup of Chobani yogurt had 5 grams of added sugar. Ooh, Devin's been replaced. Rayhan is rising to the top. All right. So now, like I said, we're going to compare that less sugar cup to this normal mango yogurt. So how much added sugar do you think there is in Chobani's normal mango yogurt? Keeping in mind that the less sugar cup had 5 grams. So go ahead and make your guesses. All right, so the added sugar in a Chobani normal mango yogurt cup is actually 9 grams. So actually, I guess that's good because most of you guessed that it had higher sugar than it normally has. But I think that goes to show you, right? Like we expect that the normal mango yogurt will just have tons of sugar because the less sugar cup had 5 grams. So we expect that difference to be huge. And then it's really up to you to decide, is the difference between 5 grams and 9 grams huge? I don't know. So 5 grams is almost half of 9 grams, right? So if you look at it that way, you could say, wow, like they slashed the sugar in half. So it is a lot lower in sugar than their normal mango yogurt. But on the other hand, if we actually look at the numbers, 5 grams versus 9 grams, right, it's really only a 4-gram difference in sugar, which for the record is just a teaspoon of sugar. So if you can imagine what a teaspoon looks like, just like a spoonful of sugar, that's the difference between a normal and a less sugar cup of Chobani mango yogurt. So again, this is like a lesson in not just trusting marketing, because if you just went by what the cup says, you might think that the less sugar added one is way healthier or way lower in sugar when it's really not that big of a difference. Ooh, answer streak of 3. That is really solid. Carl the cat. And I like your name. Okay, so now we're going to move on to what other names can sugar go by in ingredients lists? This is basically saying, what are some synonyms for sugar? So if a company doesn't want to say, my product has sugar in it in the ingredients list, what other names could they use? So we've got dextrose and maltose, sucralose and sucrose, stevia glycerite and honey, and fructose and xylitol. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Oh, we're going down to the wire here. Okay. So the correct answer was dextrose and maltose, actually. So for the record, sucralose, stevia glycerite, and xylitol are all artificial sweeteners or sugar alcohols. And basically the reason this is important is some people try to limit their added sugar intake, and then if they go and read the ingredients label and they don't see the word sugar, they think they are good to go. But this is where food companies can get you, because there's like 1,000,001 names that sugar can go by that isn't just sugar. Like it can go by dextrose, maltose, pectin, honey, cane, sugar, maple syrup, molasses. Like there's like 1,001. I can't go through all of them because I don't even know all of them. So if you are worried about your sugar intake, it might be a better idea to just look on the nutrition label for the section that says total grams of sugar. But if you want to try and memorize all 1,000 names, you are more committed than me, and I support you. Okay, so all right, looks like Carl the cat is still reigning supreme, but I see Ralph is making the climb. So keep at it. All right, so now we're going to go through how much sugar is in one serving of Baby Ray's barbecue sauce. So this is one of the most famous barbecue sauces out there. What do you think? That there should be Jeopardy music playing right now. I'm playing it in my head for you guys. All right, wow, you guys, you got it. Like I definitely would not have known that if I were you. So yeah, one serving of Baby Ray's barbecue sauce, which just keep in mind, like one serving is like 2 tiny little squirts or like 2 tablespoons, has 16 grams of sugar. So that is a really, really high amount of sugar in some barbecue sauce. And the reason I bring this up is because we talk about this in the past, how like things that we really don't view as sweet or as sugary sometimes can have a ton of added sugar in them. So like barbecue sauces, pizza sauces, spaghetti sauces, basically all the sauces, salad dressings, things like that. Even sometimes like baked goods or like canned goods and frozen dinners can have a lot of added sugar in them. So even if we don't consider something to be sweet, we got to watch out for the added sugar that these food producers are adding. Carl still on top, but Rayhan is right behind him, so. All right, now, this is kind of an important one, so I don't know how many of you will know this, but how much added sugar does the American Heart Association recommend most people consume in a day? So this is basically the upper limit that the American Heart Association recommends people consume, and they don't want you exceeding this amount in a day. And just for reference, 1 teaspoon of sugar is just about 4 grams. So you can think about the Oreos had like 13 grams, Baby Ray's had like 16 grams. That helps you sort of guide your answers. Those last answers in. All right, so the American Heart Association recommends that for men, they shouldn't go beyond 9 teaspoons of sugar in a day, and women shouldn't go beyond 6 teaspoons in a day. So in grams, men aren't supposed to be having more than, that's 36 grams, and women, should not be having more than 24 grams. So you can see how crazy easy it is to exceed that limit. Like just in 1 serving of Baby Ray's, women are going to be over 2/3, I think, of their daily limit. So that's the reason it's important to sort of keep an eye on those added sugars in products that we don't expect, because that can add up really quickly. Also, I do want to let you guys know it is 4:30, and I know that we're running a little bit late. We've got a couple more questions. So we are going to finish out the Kahoot. You're welcome to stay if you want, if you're having fun. But we do understand if you guys need to go, if you have other obligations, you will still get the XP for attending. So I just want to put that out there. But hopefully you guys are able to stay and finish out the Kahoot. So Carl's still on top, but way to go, Ralph, with a streak of 3 correct answers in a row. I see you. All right, so question 8. Okay, so how many teaspoons of added sugar are in 1 can of Coke? Now, when you're answering this, keep in mind, the American Heart Association says that men should not be having more than 9 teaspoons in a day, and women should not be having more than 6 teaspoons a day. So in our 1 can of Coke, how many teaspoons of added sugar are we consuming? Let us know what you think. All right, and then in the interest of time, yeah, try to get these answers in, you guys. I don't want to hold you too late. All right, so only 1 person got this, but in just 1 can of Coke, there are actually 10 teaspoons of sugar. So regardless of if you are a guy or a girl, If you drink 1 can of Coke, you have already surpassed the American Heart Association's suggested limit for added sugar. So things like sodas, energy drinks, coffee drinks, like bottled juices, all of that can usually have like a lot of added sugar in them. So you definitely want to be careful with how many of those you are drinking or how frequently you're drinking them if you're watching your added sugar. All right, so I see Sally is rising up a little bit, but nothing too different from last time. Okay, question 9. So how much sugar is in a serving of light ranch versus full fat ranch? So you'll see in this picture here, we've got 2 bottles of ranch, same exact company. One of them is a light version. So, and in case you didn't know this, light ranch just means that it has less fat in it. And then we have the full fat ranch on the right. So let me get your guesses in. How much sugar is in the light version versus the full fat version? And I do think we had a few people head out, so thank you so much for those of you who did arrive or who stayed until this point. All right, so in a serving of the light ranch versus the full fat ranch, the light ranch actually has double the sugar. So this is something we talk about a lot in the past. I don't know how many of you know this, but there was like a big craze around like the 2000s of like low fat everything, low fat is the way to be healthy, et cetera, et cetera. But food companies are smart, right? And the second you reduce the fat in a product, it's gonna taste a little worse. So a lot of the times what these companies do is they put out that lower fat product, but then they just way increase the sugar to make up for it and make it still taste good. So if you are interested in like a healthier option, just because it says light or low fat on it does not necessarily mean it's healthier. All right, so we still got the same lineup here. So those might have been the people who had to leave a little bit early. All right, now true or false, sugar found in fruit is equally as harmful as added sugar. What do you all think? That big bowl of fruit, is that as bad for you as eating like a big bowl of Skittles? All right, so good. I'm glad you said false. This is definitely not true. I think some people get really worried about sugar and then they feel like they have to start limiting their fruit intake, but definitely not. So fruit is really different from added sugar in the way they're digested, but in the interest of time, I don't want to go too deep into that. So I will just say sugar found in fruit is usually accompanied by fiber, which like slows the digestion down. And it also has a bunch of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and a bunch of really, really good stuff for your body. All right, Rayhan has overtaken Carl the cat. Okay, and I do think we can skip this question and just jump to the next one, because to answer this question, you do need to know a little bit more about the digestion of like sugar, which I just skipped over. So I think we'll just skip that one and go to the last question, which is our final question. What has more added sugar for each of 34 grams of each? Which has more added sugar? Heinz ketchup or some Ben & Jerry's vanilla ice cream? What are we thinking? And I know 34 grams is kind of a random weird amount, but it's like a 2 tablespoon serving of ketchup. So I tried to look at the same amount for ice cream, if you were wondering why I picked that random weird number. All right, you guys, how did you know? Did I make this too obvious? This definitely blew my mind when I saw this, but yeah, the Heinz ketchup actually has 8 grams of sugar in a little 2 tablespoon serving, and the Ben & Jerry's only has 5 grams of added sugar. So it really goes to show you, just because a product isn't sweet or isn't a dessert does not mean it doesn't have a lot of sugar added. So we want to be careful about that. And who knows, maybe we should start topping our hot dogs with Ben & Jerry's. but also maybe not. That sounds pretty gross. All right, so on our podium, in third place is Ralph. And in second place, Carl the cat. And finally, the first place winner, ooh, I like the suspense, is Rayhan. All right, way to go, all of you guys. I know that was kind of hard, but hopefully you learned something from it. I definitely didn't expect everyone to know all of the answers for that, but I thought it would still be fun to go through. All right, so I think now we're going to go back to our presentation, and I am super sorry, you guys. I went a little bit over our time limit, so I think we'll just skip over the Ask Me Anything, but if you have any questions, you can be sure to leave them in the chat, and I can reach out personally after the live event or something like that. So we will skip that section for now, and we'll just go straight to the favorite response. So if you remember, I asked at the start of the presentation about whether or not junk food is ethical. And I actually really liked Rayhan's response. He says no, because if you are making food and using science, then try to make it healthy. And I think this is a really good point that I actually didn't talk about in the path itself. But obviously these companies have a lot of money that they're putting into food science and food research. And it seems like a really, really good idea to spend at least some of that budget on how to make really healthy food that's still really delicious, right? So like if we're pouring so much money into making this like really addictive, really delicious food that's really bad for us, who knows, maybe we could use that science to make really, really delicious food that's also really good for us. So I thought that was a really interesting idea. All right, so that is it from me. Thank you to those of you who stuck around until the end. I know we went a little bit longer than we expected. If you are interested in coming to another live event, we have one tomorrow at the exact same time. So it's Wednesday at 4 p.m. And that's going to be Ellie Fitton. She's going to be going through her path on time travel and whether it's science fact or science fiction. So if you're interested in that, definitely check it out. If you want to go through any of my own paths, so the junk food and ethics was only one path out of a like 4-part package. So there are individual paths on sugar, salt, fat, and then the ethics of junk food. So definitely check those out if you're interested. And if you're not a subscriber of Track, but you really like what you saw in here, definitely be sure to check out track.app and maybe subscribe. And that is it for me, I think. Thank you so much to everyone for listening, for participating. I had a lot of fun today, and hopefully you did too. And maybe you also learned something too, hopefully. So thank you so much for coming. And hopefully we will see you tomorrow for another live event at 4. Bye, guys.